Hey guys, it's your host, Bailey Cartwright. Welcome to the Stronger Scars podcast, where I invite others to dive deep into the ups and downs of physical and mental scars. Hey guys, welcome back to the Stronger Scars podcast. Today I'm joined with Zach Guiser, who I recently just learned is from the same county as me. And we are from a very small county in Pennsylvania, so it's kind of funny. And he went to Greensburg Central Catholic, which is the high school that I also went to. And he ended up at Akron, where he was a safety on the football team. So very accomplished. I'm very excited to have you on here today and just kind of excited to talk about where you are now in your life and all the good things you're doing for athletes. So first and foremost, if you would like to say hi and introduce yourself, go right ahead.
Oh yeah, appreciate you having me on today, though, Bailey. So she did a pretty good job, pretty thorough introduction there. But like she said, I'm Zach. I went to Greensburg Central Catholic for high school. Went on to play football at the University of Akron. Then went and got my doctorate in physical therapy at Walsh University. And now I own a sports performance center and physical therapy clinic in Greensburg, about a stone's throw away from the old high school. And we train athletes, help them run faster, jump higher, all that fun stuff. But then also have a little niche where we are focused on the return to sport phase for physical therapy patients. So when you get done with that traditional physical therapy, if you're a post-op ACL patient, if you're like 4 to 6 months out, you're kind of stronger. You're able to do some functional stuff on a day-to-day life, but you're not nearly ready to go push your foot in the ground, change direction. That's our specialty, that return to sport phase. So
I think that's so cool because I feel like a lot of times, like when you think of like a performance center, it's go, go, go. It's how can we get stronger? And those are all great things. But the reality of sports is people get hurt. And I think having that inclusivity where you can get both things done at one place is probably super helpful to athletes, especially your younger athletes, like in high school. Like those resources, if they're not right available to you in college, like that's hard to find places to go get rehab and to go get strength and all these things. So I think that's really, really cool and needed what you're doing there.
thank you. That's largely the impetus for how we got started, is because I got to see what it was like at the Division I level, where you do have your PT or your athletic trainer is always talking to your strength coach, and they're always talking to your sport coach, and they're always talking to whoever it may be. And then you go out in the real world, and it's not like that in any way, shape, or form. Very much a siloed approach. Everybody's in their own bubble. And the outcomes suffer because of that. And so just saw a problem there and trying to do what we can to help alleviate that problem. It's been good. It's been fun. It's definitely a different niche of physical therapy or sports performance training, whatever you want to call the main genre of what we do. But yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. Well, before we talk about that more, let's talk a little bit about you and your experience getting to play D1 and just kind of how you got there and what it was like for you.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, like she mentioned, we are from Fayette County. So I grew up in the Fraser School District, which is different than her. She was from Connellsville. But Fraser, Fayette County has a reputation of being a little bit of a different county in general. If you're from Western PA, you've probably heard some interesting things about Fayette County. But Fraser is a very, very small school. I actually lived in a small town within that very small school. It's a town of about 500 people, called Knoll, right across the river from California University of PA. So from Fraser, very small area, but I happened to be a good football player since I was young. I was just naturally kind of bigger for that area, fast, pretty athletic. Noticed at about middle school that I was doing some pretty cool stuff that wasn't really typical. Now I come from an athletic family, but my dad didn't play high school sports. My mom didn't play high school sports, and so they liked sports. My siblings are both athletic. They both went on to have good college careers as well. But we didn't really know exactly how to navigate that whole process. And so there was just something pulling me towards Greensburg Central Catholic when it got late in that middle school, or late into middle school, to start up high school at GCC. Neither one of my siblings went, but I decided to go. And then my freshman year, we had a good team there. So I started at corner as a freshman, and I led the state in interceptions, and we went to the state championship that year. So started getting recruited pretty early. Went through the recruiting process, had some ups and downs, as that's I'm naturally a very introverted individual. And so going through the recruiting process where you have to talk and communicate all day, every day as an adolescent was not my favorite time. And I wanted to end that as quickly as possible. But I ended up, I didn't think, when I got my Akron offer, I didn't think I was going to go there at all. They were a pretty terrible, really terrible football team. They were, the 3 years before I got there, they were 1-11 for those three consecutive years. So 3-33 cumulatively. So really, really bad. But they had a new coach who was coming in. I really liked my area recruiter, who was going to also be my position coach. So that worked out really well. We had a good relationship. Went up to the campus, and just kind of, when I fell in love. It was the right place to be. So pulled the trigger, went up there, and then got hurt relatively early on, actually very early on, first week of camp. I had sports hernia surgery, which meant that I was out for that entire season. And it was not the best setup. Like I mentioned, I was a very, very, very quiet kid. And I did not make friends very easily because I wasn't outgoing. And so then first day of camp, I was completely isolated in the training room by myself all day, every day. Ended up moving forward and still had a pretty decent career. Started 3 years there. I don't know, did some decent stuff. And then my senior year, just for context. So I was obsessed with playing in the NFL. Like that, since I was young, it was actually, I wanted to play Division I football. As soon as I got to Division I football, the only thing I cared about was playing in the NFL. And then I went, and like I said, I was starting for 3 years. So it was my third year starting, going into my senior year. Was having a pretty good season. We started up the year, or we opened up the year against Penn State. Penn State was number 6 in the country at the time. It was the last year that like Saquon Barkley was there, Trace McSorley. They had a bunch of guys who are just balling out in the NFL right now. And I grew up a massive, massive Penn State fan. So my parents both went to Penn State. I was in love with Penn State growing up, but I did not get talked to. I did not recruited by them in any way, shape, or form when the new staff came in. The old staff recruited me a little bit. The new staff, not whatsoever. So I was very envious as we were going through that. And I thought that this was like a big revenge game because we watched Western Michigan. So we were a mid-major school. We were a MAC school. Watched Western Michigan the year before go to the Cotton Bowl. They went 13-0 in the regular season. They beat 2 Big Ten teams. And we were like, well, you know what? They're not built that much different than us. Yeah. And so I thought we were going to go in there and do some cool stuff against Penn State. First drive of the game, they're driving down on the field with a little bit, but I get an interception in the end zone. And so I'm like, you know what? This is exactly how we planned it. It's fairy tale stuff. It's my parents' alma mater. I grew up growing in Penn State all the time. First drive of the game, I get an interception. Like, we're about to go down and score. This is game over. It was not the case. We lost 52-0. But yeah, that didn't work out so well. But we ended up, I had a good game that game. There was a lot of NFL scouts who were coming to our practices on a regular basis, but they started talking to my coaches a lot about me after that. But then 2 games later, we're playing against Iowa State, and late in the third quarter, I was going to make a tackle. The worst play in the history of football. I dove to try to stop a guy at the goal line, got hurdled, knocked unconscious, and scored on at the exact same time. So I was laying on the field, unconscious for a few minutes. I don't remember anything about that game. I was starting to get concussions, getting concussions easier and easier, and I had some support systems built up, and it was right. The writing on the wall was there for me that I needed to end my career at that point in time. So I gave up football at that point, and then switched over and started the professional journey.
Interesting. Well, I have a few points I wrote down as you were talking that I want to discuss. So this first one, I'm digressing a little bit, but I think this is interesting. So going to a high school for sports, because this is something I did as well. Mm-hmm. And I got a lot of backlash in my little community because, I grew up playing with these certain girls, and, we were going to be in high school playing soccer together, and it was going to be like this great thing. And I thought that there was a better opportunity for myself. It was really hard. And it's obviously you're paying to go to a school. So it's like then it's a financial hardship on your family, but like you're like, oh, but it's going to pay off in the end. What was that like for you? Because it's hard. And I think sometimes people, young athletes are put in this situation, you have to leave your normalcy, your friends, to go and put yourself in a better situation for the future.
Yeah, that was it was a difficult decision at that point in time. But I do believe that it wasn't really me making the final call. I do believe there was some divine intervention going on there. Like I said, my brother had the opportunity to go. He chose not to. My sister, who's 2 years younger than me, had the opportunity to go. She chose not to. So I was the only one of my siblings who ended up going out there. But on the very first day, so the very first day that we walked into school, very first class I had was Miss Kincaid's homeroom. I don't know if you remember Miss Kincaid at all, but I was in her homeroom, and the first person I talked to, she sat next to me, was the person who is now my wife, sitting over in the living room, mother of my child. She was the very first person I met at Central, and so I do think that there was a lot more going on than just sports. Although the only thing my 14-year-old male brain could comprehend was I just want to go play football at the school that's much better than the school I play at right now. Yeah, so I don't think that it was simply a me decision at that point in time. There, like I said, there was something that was pulling me to go there. It just felt right. And from an athletic perspective, at the time that I left, Fraser had not made the playoffs in over 30 years. There was no indication that things were going to be different moving forward. And so obviously football played a role in that, but it wasn't the largest driver long term, although it was absolutely massive. But yeah, my friends from Fraser, I have only a couple of them who actually stayed with me through that and didn't give me a very hard time. And yeah, so I definitely did lose a lot of friends from Fraser during that time period. But same thing whenever you leave high school, same thing whenever you leave college. The people who you're going to be close to, you're going to be close to regardless.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting because, it's, people are like, it's high school. Like you just, you shouldn't be traveling to go to high school, whatever. And you have to put yourself in the best situation. And like, it definitely, obviously, yes, sports, but like being around like faith and, getting to go to church and stuff, like it was a very different experience than a normal high school would have been. And I mean, I'm grateful for it as well. It's just a decision you have to make.
Yeah, and on top of that, I tell people the biggest difference that I've experienced between my public school experience and my private school experience was not obviously academics or the education, the curriculum is going to be almost the same. Like you can't teach different material from place to place, but it was the environment that surrounded me at Central was massively, massively different. I have this one picture of me and a couple of my buddies from sophomore year of high school. On my left is my one friend Zach. On my right is my one friend Dan. On the same exact day, about this time last year, maybe a little bit earlier last year, but sometime last year, Zach on my left found out that he got accepted and is now in a resident at UPMC for orthopedic surgery. So he's a graduated med school, got a orthopedic surgery residency at UPMC, which is like massive. That's a huge opportunity. Like the UPMC is top of the line. And on my other side was Dan, who is now playing in the band All Time Low. And he, on the same day, he was playing on the Ellen Show in front of millions and millions of people. And so there was just I was constantly surrounded by people who wanted to do big things in life. And so you can't help but elevate yourself because everybody around you wants to be very, very successful. So yeah, it was just all walks of life. Whether it was
low, like what?
Yeah. So if you look, he's actually so they don't consider him whenever they do all their advertising stuff to be one of the 4 members, but he's the 5th guy in All Time Low. He plays with them on stage all the time. He's a very, very interesting story about how he got there. Really, really one of the nicest human beings on earth. So yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, back to what we were talking about. So I think I just want you to highlight a little bit on being an introvert and getting hurt, because that was something I experienced. I would now consider myself an extrovert, but I wasn't before. And it's so hard when you're going to a new place and you're away from your parents and you just like so much going on, and then you're hurt and you don't travel. I don't know if it was different for you, but you don't travel and you're around different people than your team it's really, really hard. So kind of talk about that, because I think that's something that so many people go through.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it other than it was really hard, because I don't make friends easily, even not that I'm not a nice person or any way, shape, or form, but I don't like people, but I just don't put myself out there. I especially whenever I was younger. So going up to a new school, being in college, being away from everybody, and then getting hurt almost immediately. Just went to some pretty dark places early on. Fortunately, though, that's whenever I got highly involved in FCA, so Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It's a Bible study that we had on campus, specifically for athletes. Got really close with my chaplain through that time period. So that was very influential for me to find some sort of camaraderie, find some sort of fellowship, some sort of belonging in a time where I really didn't belong because I was doing something different than all of my teammates were on a daily basis. And I also had the added benefit of my now wife did follow me up to Akron. So she decided to go to school up there with me. And so she was there. And so I did have some sort of social belonging, but it's also different. Like you're on a new team and you constantly feel ostracized whenever you're by yourself. So it was challenging, and it's kind of supposed to be challenging in those situations. I don't think there's a way to make it not challenging. But yeah, and I do see that a decent amount. I see so many people leave after freshman year because things don't go the way that they expect them to go. I was on a full scholarship, and so I wasn't going to go anywhere, especially that early on. But in other situations where people may not be, freshman year of college can be really hard for people. And I try to warn all my incoming seniors about that. I'm not too familiar with when you got hurt, like how far along you were in your career. So maybe if you could tell me a little bit about that.
So same thing, basically. I remember freshman year, we all went to summer school. So like the summer before freshman year started, and I started having like crazy calf pain. Like I was like, I've never experienced, like I never was hurt in my life before this.
Okay.
And then like maybe a week before our first game of the season, I got diagnosed with compartment syndrome, and they were like, all right, we got you in for surgery 2 days later after that. So it all happened like very quickly. And the rehab for compartment syndrome was supposed to be 8 weeks long. That's what they told me. That's what we were going off of. And that first surgery was a complete fail. So I had to get another one in December. So it was just like, it was endless, like never getting,
Gotcha.
you know what I mean? But, and I mean, like, I think in my experience, like there was another girl on my team who was hurt. So like we could stick together. And she was a freshman as well, but it's just really hard because like I'm a homebody as well. And like not having my, my mom and dad to like tell me it's going to be okay. It's tough. And like, it's not something like I always talk about this is like, you can't plan for it. You can't be like prepared per se, but you have to, like, when you're going into college athletics, you have to understand that like this could happen to you, and it very easily could happen when your body's adjusting to a new environment, when it's adjusting to a new coach, a new, you're gonna have to, we had to wear Under Armour, you're adjusting to new shoes. Like it's just like something you don't need to be ready for, but like at the same time, like we have to figure out a way to get athletes like having this understanding that it can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a conversation I try to have with all of my outgoing seniors. I'm fortunate to be in that position where I can have that relationship with them pre-existing, and so they can come talk to me as they're going through it, because that transition is hard for just about every. You have to be one of the very select few. If you go up there and you were an absolute baller in high school and you were top dog, and then you go up there and you get early playing time and you're top dog and everything's going great, like that doesn't happen often. Like that's super rare for that to be the case. And so whether you do or don't, whether you get hurt or whether you're just simply not good enough yet, whether you're just not athletic enough, you're not big enough, you don't understand the playbook enough, whatever it is, freshman year can be really challenging for people. So yeah, I try to prepare the seniors for that as they go into college, but I also don't want to be very negative and like,
you don't, it's one of
be a
those
damper
things,
on their experience.
you don't get it until you go through it. At the end of the day, like it's one of those things that the only way to truly understand it is to immerse yourself in it and just kind of feel it out and figure it out. Like, you just have to do it.
That's life right there, though. I mean,
Right.
that's one thing why sport is so valuable for long-term development. I mean, like we were talking a little bit before, I've got a 6-month-old, and absolutely nothing could have prepared me for having a child besides having a child. You don't sleep a lot. You are all over the place. Your existence is not for yourself in any way, shape, or form anymore. But having the resilience to continue to push through and find solutions. And so being somebody who solves problems is something that sport teaches you, and it translates to life very, very well. So it's
Right.
a tough time, but tough times can be great learning opportunities.
Right. Okay, last question. This is a topic, obviously, that I feel like in the last 10 years has been very heavily discussed in the athletic world, is concussions, especially in football players. And how did you know, like, because you didn't get to the point of like, this is do or die, correct?
So that's not really. It's debatable what that point is, but the last one was scary. Continue though, if you.
Yeah. So how did you like tell yourself that you've been working for your whole life for this? You finally get to that point, and then this injury that you can't for say see, there's no one who's going to tell you that you're on crutches. It's not something you can noticeably see that you're on the sideline for. What was that decision for you to internally say, I have to walk away from this?
Yeah, I honestly don't even know how to answer this question to this day. We're we're about 5 years removed from it now. And I was very fortunate to have the most powerful support system imaginable. And I had external achievements that allowed me to have a life outside of football. And so I was very fortunate in that regard, to where I have many teammates, or had many teammates who did not have a ton going on. They didn't have the same family system. They didn't have the same. I was already engaged at that time. They didn't have the same career path outside of that, to where if football doesn't work, there's nothing else on the table. But so I had my wife, and like I said, the last concussion was scary. I was unconscious on the field for several minutes. I was just about to go on the stretcher whenever I came through, and so whenever you're actually on the protocol, they are the most important thing is cervical spine health, and so making sure your neck's okay. And so the head athletic trainer was directly behind me, holding my helmet down to make sure that like there was no neck movement in case there was some sort of cervical fracture, which keeping me safe long term. But whenever I came through, obviously I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know anything, but I just tried to get up and I couldn't get up. And so I thought for a moment there that I was paralyzed, just because he's holding my head down and I couldn't like move my head. And so there was a lot of just anxiety that came from that. The thought of putting a helmet on again was just pretty terrifying. So I had a strong, I was already accepted into physical therapy school. I had stuff going on outside of that. And so seeing the fear in my wife's eyes, seeing the fear in my parents' eyes, kind of helped with that. It helped see the bigger picture, to see everything else that, hey, I've got another 70 years to live, or whatever it may be. And I want to make sure I optimize that time. But I also do think, Bailey, if I'm being transparent, I was burnout on football. And it was almost a way out at times. And I don't think that I've really articulated that well in the past, but I've been playing football since I was 5 years old, and it was who I was. It was my entire identity. It was everything that I did. And I did not love the game anymore. It was my profession. It was something that I didn't enjoy. I was burnt out, and maybe on a subconscious level, I saw an opportunity to escape the burnout for a bit and stepped away. But I think that it was the logical thing to do anyways. We talked about, we look at the impact that concussions can have. The data still isn't clear. It's still not there. And so for me at that point in time, it seemed like the best decision for myself to make.
I'm happy you bring this up, because I've had this conversation with a few of my teammates before, but just when you go to college, and it isn't fun anymore. The sport that you played your whole life with your friends isn't fun. And that's not for everyone. You know, some people still enjoy it, don't get burnout and things, but sometimes it's really easy to just want to have a desire to be hurt, want to have a desire for something to go wrong. Just like you said, have that way out. And like, I don't know what the answer is. I think a lot of things go into the experience of a college athlete, but too many times I hear people talking about how as soon as they got to college, they lost the love of the sport and they were looking for a way out that wouldn't make them look weak, that wouldn't make them be judged by other people. And it's sad that people, you know, don't get to enjoy the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that that's a common practice. I think there's a lot that goes into that. And I think, again, I think that's reminiscent of life. I think that there are very, I'm in entrepreneurship now, and there are times where it would be nice if something would happen where, you know, snow days, for example, whenever this past winter, whenever the roads got really icy and it wasn't necessarily safe for us to have the facility open and people to go on the roads, it was nice to have a reason to close the facility to have a day off because you get burnt out on something. And I think that injuries are are analogous to snow days for sport, especially in college athletics where snow days don't exist. No matter what, you're showing up to the facility, you're getting your work in that day. Yeah, so I do think that that's definitely a problem. I don't think that's isolated to just me or you or anybody that you've talked to. I see that a lot, actually. It's just a reason to be done.
Right. All right. Let's talk about your business and let's talk about what made you, like, how did you know that you wanted to go into this? Because I get so fascinated with people who played sports for their whole lives and then like have to retire, like the time's up, and then they want to be around sports more. Because I always say this, and I think some people just look at me like I'm crazy. Like, I'm jealous, like I get envious, like I don't know. Maybe it's just me, maybe I just am trying to like live a life I'm not living. But how, like, what made you want to do that? Because you're constantly around athletes, you know, being in that position that you were once in. But I mean, obviously you're playing a role and you're helping them, but don't you get like jealous?
Yeah, I think that's a really. First of all, I love the questions that you sent over. I showed them to my wife, and like it's like my favorite list of things to talk about. So you did a really good job crafting those questions. But yeah, so this one, I think that absolutely never been asked this, but that's a very real thing, and I don't think so. I don't get envious of the athletes that we train. I am now old enough to where I do not. I got to accomplish a lot from an athletic standpoint, so I don't feel like I was sold short in that way, in any way. But so I don't get jealous or envious of the athletes that we have. I love seeing their success. I love seeing whenever they get to go out there and enjoy the game that they love playing. It's my favorite thing in the world to go watch them. We've got some girls who are playing in a softball Whitfield championship today, and I'm anxious for them right now. Like I'm super excited for them. So I love that. I love that. Other things, I don't get envious of them, but I do because a lot of people I've played with or against are still playing in the league. They're still playing in the NFL. And so like, I don't watch Sunday football because I've lined up against that person and I know that I can cover them. Like I know that I'm good enough to do that. And so I just don't watch NFL football for the most part anymore because that's the time when I do get envious because I know that, like, hey, I've covered that guy. I know he's not significantly better than I am. I could be there too if it wasn't for this. But I do think that where I'm at in life is exactly where I'm supposed to be. But consciously knowing that, being aware of that, and then internalizing that and feeling that are two different things whenever it comes to watching that. But yeah, I don't get envious of our current athletes. Again, the older I get, the easier that is, the less that would happen because I'm not near their time frame.
Right.
But yeah, that's a really good question.
I just like, I don't know, because I'm actually going back and doing a fifth year. I'm going to like a small D3 school and playing. But
Saw that. That's awesome.
yeah, I'm excited. I had my first practice and now I have blisters all over my feet. And it's
Oh
gonna be
no.
it's gonna be tough. And that's why I wanted to do it, if I'm being honest, because I think sometimes, you know, kind of like we were talking, like it's easy to not do hard things sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna do it. And like it's gonna be hard. And like I hope it shows people like, you know, sometimes you do have to put your head down and prove yourself wrong, prove other people wrong, and just finish what you started. Like I started playing soccer when I was 5 years old. I want to finish it for myself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's awesome.
Um, where was I going with this? Oh, but yes, I think it's just sports, like you said earlier, like it's just such this amazing thing. It brings people together. It does so many amazing things. It teaches us life lessons, but it's like it's like someone dies when you lose it. It really is. It's dramatic, some may say, but it is. And yeah, that's something I've struggled with. And like I'll bring it out to my friends and like, no, I don't get jealous. And I'm like, you guys are lying. Like it's not easy to watch other people live out what you thought you were going to live out.
So that's a fantastic point, and it's actually the one of the biggest drivers for from a psychological perspective of why our company exists. And because you are what I would call a conscientious overachiever, because you have put so much of your life, your ambition, your worth, your identity towards a specific goal. And so you have done a ton. You have changed schools. You have given up a ton of social life. You have given up a ton to accomplish the goal of becoming a elite level soccer player. And you've put so much of your worth, so much of your status into that objective that it becomes very difficult to separate from that objective because it's who you've been. And so that's the impetus for our existence, is because I was that person. Those kids are still existing today. They're coming up through the ranks.
Yep.
And so I want to serve those kids to help them realize that they are not only worth what they are worth on the field or in the classroom. So that way they don't necessarily have that same level of turmoil whenever it does all come crumbling down, because it does come crumbling down for everybody at some point. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about we're going to talk about mental health later on, but let's kind of talk about the nitty gritty of how this performance center became reality, because you're pretty young. Like that's kind of crazy that you were able to go through PT school. My best friend is in PT school right now, and it's hard. I know it's hard. And, you know, you went through all that and then you made your own business. So kind of talk about, you know, like honestly, the logistics of this, because someone listening might be really interested in how you got people and how, I mean, like you got the funds to start your own business. Like just kind of talk about how that all came to life.
Yeah. So as soon as I got done playing football, I switched over. Like this was game 3, and I just started being a student coach almost. Like I'd be up in the box. As soon as that season was done, I started interning with our strength and conditioning staff. And I, at the same time, needed to make money. Interns in the strength and conditioning field don't make money, and you work an absurd amount of hours. So I got a job as a part-time strength and conditioning coach at a local private facility in Ohio that's similar to the one that I have now. So I worked there, and I got accepted into PT school right down the road from there. And so I just stayed in that area and continued to work as a strength coach, sports performance coach, whatever in the world you want to call it, at that facility while I was going to PT school. I knew pretty early on that physical therapy can be one of the most boring professions in the world if you don't do it the right way. It can be extraordinarily time consuming and non-productive, and it's just a bunch of documentation, and you don't get to treat the patient population you want to treat. And I loved working with athletes. And so I knew that's the route that I wanted to go. And so started crafting the vision for the performance center. Knew that Greensburg didn't necessarily have something that was similar to what we've developed now, and just started forming that vision in my head. And once COVID hit, we had a non-compete agreement with the facility that I worked at. Once COVID hit, like the day that it was Friday, March 13th, whenever everything kind of really shut down, all gyms in Ohio had to shut down. That non-compete essentially went up in flames. And so I started doing online training. And so when it comes to, if somebody does want to start their own business, so they want to do their own things, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, refers to entrepreneurship as jumping off a cliff and building the plane on the way down. So just do something, just go for it, do something, figure out how to do it as you're doing it. And so I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but I just went home literally as soon as I drove home from the facility, got on my couch, typed up this like, it was on iPhone notes. Like I had no idea how to create like a PDF. I didn't know what Canva was. I didn't know anything about how to create a flyer. I just typed up, hey, I'm taking online clients, and I actually had like a logo made up from before. Had obviously nobody's really interested in that. Like I just typed this up in my iPhone notes. The world's crumbling down. Who cares about this right now? But I had a few friends and family who were just wanted to support. I charged almost nothing because I didn't know how much to charge. I didn't know nothing about business at this time. And but I knew how to train. I knew how to coach, and I knew how to get people to care about their training and get them to get results. And people will solve you or pay you to solve problems. That's what business is. If you can identify a problem and you can become world class at solving that problem, people will pay for you to solve that problem. So we got good results with a few friends and family. And I like friends and family, like I don't even know if I could say it was plural. Like I think I had like one or two friends and then like one family member. And like they told somebody, and then they tell somebody, and then they tell somebody. So then we moved home. We will move home. So we live in like the Menneson area now.
Okay.
So moved back to Western PA. Got a house. We bought a house here 2019, and one of the things that made us buy this specific house because it had a 3-car detached garage that is not, that doesn't have drywall. It's just bare insulation. There's no air conditioning. There's no heat. There's no nothing down there. But I put a weight room down there, and I had a few people who had just seen my Instagram posts, even though they were getting like 3 likes or something like that at the time. And the mom of somebody or one of my mom's friends has a son who was a very skinny freshman, a very skinny freshman basketball player, and he was getting abused. He was playing varsity. He was getting abused in the paint. He was getting beat up really good, and his mom wanted him to put on some weight. She knew just because of my few Instagram posts, Facebook posts. That's what I did. So he started training with me. Got really good results with him. Got somebody else in there. They told more people, and now we're sitting and we have a nice 7,000 square foot facility. And when it comes to funds, I laughed out loud whenever I saw that on your question. There was no funds. There was absolutely no money to start this business. It was just train some people with absolutely nothing. We actually went to the field to do our speed and agility work. There's a field in Bell Vernon. We go there, do speed and agility work, come back to the weight room in my house, do our strength training. Trained some people, made some money, saved up enough to buy a piece of equipment, trained some more people, made some more money, saved up to buy another piece of equipment, 100% bootstrapped. We put our, I think it was $3,500 tax return into the facility whenever we actually got a brick and mortar facility, and then just kept growing it from there, which is wild. It was purely naive optimism at the time. I didn't know anything. I'm a much better businessman now than I was 2 years ago, a year ago. But just going for it and just letting it rip and just really caring about people. If you can bring awareness to something, so if you make people know that you exist, and if you make people aware that there's a problem, then you become world class at solving that problem. And then you just continue to ask people to tell other people, or you just continue to have them raise awareness, and continue to care about the results they get, care about them as human beings, you'll end up being successful. The whole physical therapy school thing, I kind of glanced over that. I was going through PT school as I'm doing all that stuff. I was fortunate in the fact that I've never found school to be incredibly difficult. I learned relatively easily. It's not like I'm incredibly smart. I'm a good test taker, and so was able to get away with some more things. And I'm very fixated, very focused on one objective at a time. And so I didn't really go hang out with a bunch of people. I worked at the facility I was working at and studied and planned the business throughout physical therapy school. So no funds to start the business, just a vision, a dream, and jumping off the cliff, building the airplane on the way down.
Well, that makes me feel good because I I know we talked a little bit, but like I have a desire to make Stronger Scars into like a nonprofit. And it's very intimidating when you look at it
Mhm.
from the beginning and you're like, where do I start? Is this even gonna live? Like, so that makes me feel good.
We'll have to have a longer conversation about that off air because I would like to provide some sort of insight and deeper insight into kind of how it looked for us, because it's still kind of a jumbled mess,
Right.
but it's a jumbled mess that pays for our life right now.
Right.
It's a sustainable thing. Doing things is incredibly important. Imperfect action is something that, another term they use for it. My brother is he has an MBA. He's a certified public accountant. He is now the CFO at St. Vincent. I've told him to his face, I think that he would make, it would be a lot harder for him to start a business than it was for me, because he knows too much about business to
Yep.
start a business. Because you have so much fear. If you try to figure everything out before you get started, there's too much to figure out. There's too much going on. There's too much that could go wrong. There's too much that you don't know about. And so it's just doing something and then figuring it out as you go is really important. Obviously, you have to have like some sort of broad scope plan of what you're doing, how you're going to accomplish it. But the nitty gritty details, they are not something you should really worry about too much, especially if it's something that you can scale and bootstrap. The guy I mentioned earlier, Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, he wouldn't advise bootstrapping a business. He advises getting external capital, and so getting as much funding as possible. But I'm not chasing scale. I'm not chasing to have this massive entity. I'm chasing to have this one location where we make a very deep impact on the kids that we serve. And so, yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about that at some point. So speaking of the kids that you're training, so
Mm-hmm.
I was asking, and also I didn't say this earlier, I like how you were engaged in college, because we got engaged in college and then got married the summer after, and everyone thought we were crazy. So that makes me smile that someone else did it.
Good, yeah.
But what are some of your favorite things about these clients that you have? Because I was talking to my husband about it, and he was like, ask him like, what is his ideal client? Like, is there something that just like ticks and he likes to watch, them grow? And like, so kind of just like explain to us like what the ideal client looks like for you. And is there someone, in there now? Like, I know for those of you like who've listened to the podcast before, and Neil McDermott works with Zach, which I think is awesome. And like, I know he's probably so fun to watch. Like, he's killing it right now. Actually, I don't know if the season's over, but he was killing it. But just getting to like watch your work pay off, and watch these clients who work their butt off with you and then get to go out and play and be successful. What's that kind of like, and what's the ideal situation for you?
Perfect. So your husband has to have some sort of business or marketing background if he's talking about the ideal client, if that was a question you brought up. And so, yeah, we talk a lot about, I spent a lot of time figuring out my ideal client starting up. So when I was first starting up, you can have an idea of what you want to go with, but your ideal client is the person who's going to pay you money to do a service, because you need to figure it out. You just need to get as much experience as possible. But as we've gone on, I've realized, and this is a term I used to describe you earlier here, Bailey, it's the conscientious overachiever. And so there's a lot of different sports performance centers that'll focus on one specific sport. They'll niche down, and like they'll only train soccer players. They'll only train baseball players. One, Greensburg isn't big enough to just do that. There's too many. It's not like it's the city of Boston, where you have to go super, super, super niche to have enough to really stand out. If we niche down on an athlete, that's far enough with us. But the athletes that I feel that I'm able to best serve are those conscientious overachievers who are constantly trying to do that extra thing. We track RPE. So RPE is rate of perceived exertion. It's how we measure intensity for an exercise. And so it's just a way you say, on a scale of 0 to 10, how difficult was that set? And I'll have like so many of my athletes will be like, I don't know if it was a 6, a 6.5, a 7, a 7.3. Like, they're just very, very specific, very detail oriented. And they have objectives that they like to accomplish. So I think those people are drastically underserved by coaches that they have elsewhere most of the time, because as a team coach, you're typically trying to pull up those who aren't trying as hard, or maybe don't want it as enough. So your practices, your punishments, your your strategies are dictated to bring everybody up to that level of effort. These people already have that level of effort. They're actually probably up here, and we need to pull them down more often. We need to protect them from themselves. We need to say, hey, you know what? You shouldn't go out and swing a bat for the 5th time today. Like, you shouldn't go out for your 3-hour session for the 3rd time this day. Like, you just need to rest. You need to recover. You need to realize that this is not okay, or that this is going to be okay, or you made a mistake. You made a mistake in the game. You dropped a ball, whatever it is. Like, it's going to be okay. The world's going to keep turning. I've never benefited from being yelled at whenever I was an athlete. Now, I could take it. I could. It's not like I was soft in any way. Like, if I had a coach screaming at me, I didn't completely crumble, but it never helped me. Like, I was always the most hard person on myself. Like, however much you yelled at me, I was going to take it. I was going to internalize it way more than that if you never said a word to me.
Right.
And so those people are the ones that I tend to be the best at serving, because I'm able to pull them back. I'm able to relate to them. And so from a sports standpoint, I love getting on the field. So I like speed and agility stuff. So field-based sports are kind of I don't want to say my favorite, because I like training rotational sport athletes, baseball players, softball players. I like training all different types of athletes. I like the mix. It's just being a defensive back. Like, all I did was run and change direction all day. And so I kind of have an affinity for that. But more so, I care about personality, and I really love serving those athletes who are very detail oriented, who want to get better, but sometimes they just need a little protection from themselves. And so what their wins look like to me, I love watching, obviously, them have success. We have a number of girls on that Whitfield Championship team that are playing today, that are very much in line with that niche, that description I just went over. So seeing them accomplish the stuff they want to accomplish is really important. But I also have athletes who, whenever I see them, like, I have a pitcher, actually, I guess I'm just talking about that team today. A pitcher on that same team has an injury that is preventing her from playing in her Whitfield Championship game. She actually missed the vast majority of this season. Very much a type A overachiever, on the point, like perfect, or tries to be perfect athlete all the time. She's missing this game, but she's handling it well. She's mentally in a good place right now, despite the fact that she's missing that game. And that kind of means a lot to me right now. The fact that she's able to navigate through those difficult times better.
Right. Yeah. I think that's very important too. Like, obviously, I mean, yes, let's talk about the mental health conversation, because I have that written down. So I'm just kind of interested in this, because obviously you're not, like, are you seeing these athletes every day? Like, do they come every day?
1 to 3 days a week. So
Okay.
actually, I have a couple like pro guys who are coming in 4 times a week or so, but for the most part, 1 to 3 times per week.
Okay. So you're seeing these athletes 1 to 3 times a week, and you're not like their coach, where you're, like their high school sports coach. You're seeing them every day. You're not their parents, obviously going home with them and seeing how they're reacting to things, seeing if something's changing in them. So how do you think seeing them a few times a week, like, how can you play an impact in their mental health? How can you notice if something's up? How can you prioritize their mental health? Because I love how, like, you reached out to me and you're like, I love that you're talking about mental health, and it's a conversation that, like, no one's having really. Like, so how are you putting that into play at GT?
Yeah. So one of the things we have them fill out a daily readiness assessment every single day. So even when they don't see me, they fill out this daily readiness assessment. It's a series of 5 questions. It's asking them about how stressed they are, how sore they are, how many hours of sleep they got, how energized they are, different things like that. So if I can see their stress level skyrockets from a 1 on a regular basis, and all of a sudden we're at a 9 stress, then I reach out to them. I shoot them a text. Hey, what's going on? Is there anything I can help you with? So that's the way I can monitor them, and I can track trends over time and see how everything's going for them. So that's one way to do it. But then there's also, so that allows me to be present on a regular basis for them. But then whenever I do see them, I try to talk about things often that aren't sport. Try to get to know them on an individual basis, find out what their hobbies are outside of it, and talk a lot about that. Sometimes I have athletes, it depends on how they're coming to me. I have some athletes who are main drivers for them coming to see me. Like they ask their parents if they can come train with me because they want to do better. I have some athletes who it's their parents who are wanting them to be there. They don't necessarily want to be there. And so finding out like if it is somebody who has a quote unquote helicopter parent where they're just constantly being bombarded by you need to do this better, you need to do this better. I pretty much, obviously we have them trained, we give them world-class performance training. I'm talking a lot about the internal stuff, but like I'm a performance nerd. I love talking about training, and we give them world-class service in that regard. But for them, I won't really talk much about the training or the sport. I'll talk about everything else that's going on inside of it, and just be kind of a break for them. Let them have fun. Fun is our most important thing that we can do at the facility, especially with our younger athletes, making sure that they have a healthy relationship with exercise. But yeah, and so I'd say those are the two biggest ways: maintaining a relationship and that keeping that relationship strong, even when things aren't going well. I'd say even especially when things aren't going well from an athletic standpoint, being somebody who cares about them despite the fact that maybe they lost the game for their team or whatever it may be. But to be honest with you, Bailey, I don't know the answers right now because we are in a very, very scary time for our young athletes. And I think we need to do more. I just don't know exactly what more looks like right now.
Right. Well, I'm kind of curious because I'm just like, I'm not around it. I'm not around younger athletes anymore. It's not in my day-to-day life anymore. So have you been seeing a lot of mental health problems? Is it, like something that a lot of like younger kids are dealing with? Like, what is your take on that?
So I won't say that I think that it's necessarily more so than it ever has been. I think we're just more aware than we ever have been about it. And that could be my own internal bias because this is where I spend a lot of my time thinking about. And so just a lot of our athletes that we train are very anxious individuals, and they internalize their own mistakes often. And so I do see that there is a lot of that goes on, but then we talk about the stuff that has made bigger headlines. Obviously, there's been some significant life decisions that have been made by some young athletes who it's very sad. And I get it. Like I know where they're coming from. Like I've been in those dark places, and so it's a scary place to be, and you don't see the rest of the world. You don't see the big picture at that moment in time. You're just focused. I use a forest and trees analogy a lot of the time. Like you don't see the whole forest whenever you're in that place. You just see this one particular tree, and it's all you can see, and that tree's never moving. There's nothing you can do to get out of your way. There's nothing you can do to cut it down. So just being there, present constantly. You never know what impact you can have. You never know what you can do.
Right. Yeah. I think especially, with, like you said, there's just been a lot of suicides. I mean, let's just say it as it is, like in the athletic community recently. And I did an episode with Tyler Hill. I'm sure you've heard of Tyler Hilinski. I talked to his parents on an episode, and like, I just like wanted to cry the whole time because you think about the loved ones of someone who takes their own life too. It's tough because you feel like you should know everything about that person. But like you said, like they're seeing one thing, they're seeing the tree, not the forest. Because I tried, like, obviously I think about this a lot too. Like someone who thinks that suicide's the only answer. I think people can look at that and be like, like why would they do that? Why? There's so many things out there. There's so many like resources and availabilities. It's a disease. Thinking that that's the only answer, having, this decision that you want to completely end your life, that's a disease. It's something that they don't ask for and they can't help. And I think that mentality is something that people have to understand, have to be compassionate about. Like no one's asking to have this sickness that makes them think that the only answer to get out is to kill themselves. It's not something that anyone wishes upon themselves. And yeah, I do think the athletic community can do more. I know for a fact that you went through it. I went through it, D1, D2, D3. Like these schools can definitely do more. There can be more resources. There can be more, all these things. But at the end of the day, like we just have to preach to these athletes that like, this is a sport. This is not your life. Like there is so much more. There's years to come. There's life to come. There's experiences. And, you know, the minute that that can stick with someone, then that's when it will really be beneficial. And they'll hopefully have this switch of like, my life is not worth soccer. My life is not worth football. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if we look at the types of athletes, obviously this is a generalization. It's not always the case, but a lot of these athletes who are committing suicide, they are like you hear all the stories about them. They were the hardest worker on the team. They had the best attitude on the team. They were always super energetic. They got good grades. They almost always were a very good student as well as being a very good athlete. And it's the conscientious overachievers who they internalize everything constantly. And so they're going to protect their image. People around them aren't going to know something's going on unless you just constantly poke and prod and try to do as, I mean, obviously for my, or in my situation, like nobody had any idea anything was going on ever. Like my wife had an indication because she lives with me. And so obviously she's going to see a lot more than anybody else ever would, but nobody else, like I intentionally, whether I was aware of it or not, like I wanted to always project this facade of perfection. Like I've been with my wife since I was 14 years old. So I found the love of my life super early on. I played Division I football. I was a captain on the Division I football team. I had a 3.99 GPA in undergrad. Then I finished first in my class in my doctoral program. Like, look, I started a business whenever I was this young. Like everything looks great from the outside. It's almost, I never sought to create that, but because I want to protect my image, I want to protect, I just constantly want to achieve this level of high success. Like we create this facade, this illusion of everything's fine all the time. And even whenever it's not. And those type of people they care too much. If you care a ton about something, you're more likely to take action and do something like suicide than if you don't. If you don't care about something, then it's not going to affect you nearly as much. And so people who are those overachievers are more likely to have that happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's tough because, you know, everyone is so different. And that's the thing about mental health is like, there's no two brains that are the exact same.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this harder to figure out answers for, is because so many people are different and you don't know the whole story. You never know the whole story. Let's be real. The only person who knows the whole story is that person who's going through it. And I don't know the answer. I really don't. But I think that sports they need to be a place of safetyness and like a place of joy, and a place where when you're having a bad day, you get a bad test grade that you can go to and escape to. And, you know, I just think that universities and even younger, I mean, it doesn't just happen in college, it happens all the time. You know, there has to be a better communication with these athletes, like figuring out what it is that they need and, you know, how can where they are best help them and whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, it's just like, it has to be better. It's not okay that we're losing lives, because it's not okay.
No, absolutely couldn't agree more.
So speaking of, I love the name Greater Than Performance, correct? That's what it's GT. Yep. So I'll post like I'll post like the website and the podcast notes and everything, but the website does a great job of explaining what it means. But kind of just go into, because I think this obviously goes hand in hand with mental health too. Like it's greater than, you know, there's a lot more. So kind of just talk about that and what the inspiration for that being the name and lifestyle that you guys kind of implement there is.
Yeah, no, so it's kind of a double entendre. Obviously, the greater than has the direct performance component, where it's like, hey, I'm going to be greater than whatever it was, whether it's my competitor or myself from yesterday, whatever it is. So there's that component. The more fundamental, important meaning, though, is the I am greater than my worth as an athlete, my worth as a student, whatever I do. I think that's an important one as well. We talk so much about people putting your worth in athletics, but I personally put a lot of my worth in academics as soon as athletics were over. And so you're greater than who you are in whatever profession, whatever hobby you do. And so that kind of stemmed largely from my, obviously from my own issues, my own self-worth issues. I struggled and continue to struggle with seeing my value outside of what I present whenever I was a football player, or what I present now as a coach, therapist, business owner, just seeing intrinsic value. I am a firm believer, and so I believe that our worth is found in Christ, and our life mission is to know Him and to make Him known. So I think that outside of that, nothing else really matters. But yeah, so where that came from in terms of actually getting it, it's kind of an interesting side note. So whenever I first got done with college, undergrad, I was like, I need to make some money before I got the job at the private sector place. And I was gonna do some online training. So I had somebody make a logo, and it was like, Guiser Training at first. Like, it's a horrible name. You don't want to name a business after yourself if you ever name a business, because then you can't ever, if you want to get out of it, you're stuck. Like, you can't scale yourself out of it anyway. And so I was thinking of names because I already had the logo. And I was like, man, that's goes exactly greater than. That goes exactly with what I'm looking for. It made the initials match already. I don't have to get a new logo made. So it worked out from that regard. But again, I think that's another one of those divine intervention mistakes. I had no clue what I was doing whenever I did it, but I think God had a different plan and led it in the right direction there.
Yeah, that's funny. And I think, I would hope for parents, that are sending their athletes there, or the athletes who make the decision to come themselves. I hope that that is an important piece to them, that you don't just focus on getting stronger, getting faster, but you do have an element of caring about them, caring about their well-being and their mental well-being. Growing up, I'm sure you went through the same thing. We didn't talk about mental health. It was not a thing. Not that people didn't care, I guess, but it just like didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I think it's really awesome you guys are doing that now.
So I will say, Bailey, we intentionally in our marketing advertising, you will never see anything about what I just talked about. It's listed on our website that we say GT is greater than. We go on a little spiel about that. But intentionally, I'm trying to target athletes who right now don't care about that. They care about becoming the freakiest athlete they can, the best athlete humanly possible, because that's what their objective is. And so that's why, fortunately, like I said, I'm a training nerd. I don't have hobbies. I love talking about training. I love talking about rehab. I love helping athletes get better. That's what my passions are. I made my hobby into a career. And so we strictly just give the highest level of service we can. We try to go above and beyond and provide the latest research. I invest in all the latest technology. So like, we use all our laser timers, our electronic jump mats, all that different stuff. And so we just advertise the world-class service, but I kind of refer to what we do as a Trojan horse operation, where it's like, hey, you're coming in here, we're giving you the highest quality training you possibly can. But while we're doing that, we're building a relationship with you. We are learning a lot about you. We're getting you to trust us. We're getting to know you on a deeper personal level, so that when you don't get that scholarship, or when you do get hurt, or whenever whatever goes wrong, you don't make the team, we have that pre-existing relationship with you, so that we can actually pour into you in the way that we want to. And so our outright service that we market, most people, they're not going to pay a bunch of money for us to tell them that their value is more than their sport, because they don't know that they need to know that right now. You don't know that until you need to know that. And so we just give them world-class training, advertise that, and then we, like I said, use the Trojan horse, they call it Trojan horse Christian operation, give them a little Jesus if need be later on.
Well, I think you hit on something that is underestimated, and that's just listening to people, hearing people's story, and watching them grow. That was kind of the basis between why I wanted to start Stronger Scars, is because I thrive off of sharing my experience with people because it makes me feel better to know that my voice is out there and it's heard. And I think that's how so many people work. It's nice to know that your voice can be heard even when you feel so little. So just talking to people, just letting them share their story, letting them tell you about their day, I think it goes, so far. And it's something it's so basic. So we don't think it does anything. It doesn't have any value, but I think it's so underestimated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you do here is awesome. I think that obviously you sharing your story, you sharing your side of the story is very important. But you also, at the same time, give a voice to others. And when you hear other people have their similar stories, feel the same thing, it gives you a sense of belonging, gives you a sense of less ostracization. You don't feel like you are so alone through all this. And so I think what you do here is absolutely awesome, Bailey.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's daunting sometimes because I'm sure you get this. Like you're like, is this having an impact? Am I changing someone's life? Am I helping change someone's life? It can be intimidating sometimes.
Because you don't know, and the thing is, you will never know. You will absolutely never know if you do. Sometimes you'll get a story back and say, hey, I listened to that one podcast,
Yeah.
and that made such a big difference. But you don't know what would happen if that didn't exist. Like they might not know how impactful what you did is. They might not know that listening to that podcast that they heard 3 months ago gave them a different perspective, which allowed them to handle something 3 months later down the road much better. And so it's you can't collect data on it. You can't quantify the impact that you're having. You just have to believe that it's having that impact later on. So yeah, it's hard.
Good point. So I want to talk, I know we talked a little bit about earlier is how you guys really focus on that return to play aspect. And again, like that's something I think a lot of places maybe don't focus on as much. It's just kind of, especially in younger athletes, like, in college, you're going to have a regimen, you're going to have someone telling you what to do for the most part. And that return to play, it's not an easy process, but they try to make it as easy as they can for you. So just kind of talk about first, I'm kind of curious, like obviously your own experience, but what made you want to really factor in on that?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about finding a problem, solving the problem. That's how you can run a successful business. There's a large gap in between rehab and performance training right now. And so I like the performance side of things more than I like the early stage rehab side of things. But I think that the fact that I've got a significant amount of performance training under my belt. That's been my specialty. That's what I've done for a living for a long time now. And then I am a licensed physical therapist, and so I've treated a lot of patients. It allows me to see both ends of that and bridge that gap between the two. Most physical therapists do a really good job at what physical therapy school teaches you to do, and that's to get people to live a functional life. They can go through everyday life and be functional and do the things they need to do to survive and maybe have light hobbies. They have absolutely no idea how to take somebody to an elite level performance. Preparing an athlete to go out there and perform at their highest level is very, very different than preparing somebody to go run a 5K or just whatever it may be. And so identified a big problem within that area, and just I'm really passionate about it because I see people get misserved all the time. Like I got very frustrated when I do my clinical rotations. I'd go out there and they'd run out of insurance visits, and there's still like 60% quad deficit on their injured leg or whatever it may be. And I would get very frustrated. I knew that there was a lot more that we could do, and developing this system allows us to meet those athletes where they are, because everybody's on their own individual program. Everybody does their own thing, but it's a way that we can scale it and make it affordable, because it's not affordable to once you run out of visits or whatever it may be to pay $125 every session that you need to come in, whether it's 2 to 3 times a week, to actually see significant progress. So we've developed a system that allows us to make a good living, allows us to provide what we need to provide, but also make it very affordable for everybody else to get this high quality training that they need. And I love working with injured athletes specifically because they're super vulnerable at that point in time.
Yeah.
It's a massive time to make a big impact on their life. But then from a um, critical thinking standpoint, there's a lot of problem solving that goes on. You have to think on your feet. Things go different, things go wrong. If you have a healthy athlete, you can pretty much predict how they're going to feel most of the time. If you have an athlete returning from an injury, it can be absolutely all over the place. And so it allows me to think critically and continue to challenge myself from a X's and O's standpoint.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Have you had anyone with compartment syndrome?
From a true rehab standpoint, yes. I haven't done like return to play stuff from
Really?
just return to play, not at the facility, but yeah, I've treated
Have you?
compartment syndrome before. Yeah, not fun.
It's not. It's changed my
No,
life.
I can imagine. So, how's everything feeling for you so far as you're going back into
It's
soccer here?
honestly like I've been like working really hard in the gym and stuff right now. So like I've always been told like through this process, because I ended up having 4 surgeries. Like it's kind of like, it's like absurd, but I've always been worried about gaining too much muscle mass back just in my calves, obviously. You would know more about this. But yeah, and like growing up, so I played at the Pittsburgh Riverhounds and we had a strength coach. And so we lifted once or twice a week. And so I was very accustomed to, lifting going into college. Like a lot of my teammates never really did that before. And I don't know, like I always could lift a lot. Like I had strong legs. And I guess that could have played a role in why I got compartment syndrome. No one knows why. No one's ever going to know why, I guess. It's frustrating. But so I've just been concerned about like not getting too strong, I guess. Like people would laugh like, "Oh, you don't want to get too buff," but like honestly, like yeah, you know what I mean? Um but yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be the same soccer player as I was. And that's going to be a very hard mindset to wrap my mind around. I'm going to have to figure out different ways to be effective. But it's the reality of life. I know we've been talking about that a lot today. Like, that's life.
Yeah, that's that really is life right there. You have to find a different way to get the job done. Figure out, especially, I mean, that's just a professional athlete's career. As they get older, they lose their athletic ability. It's kind of a similar situation to you, where you're necessarily going to be as athletic as you were before. If you can maybe find new ways to get the job done, become a little bit more skilled than maybe you were in the past, or whatever it may be. But if you happen to come back to the Greensburg area and you want me to take a look at stuff and see if we can help you out a little bit, Bailey, just come
Yeah.
on back down, okay?
Yeah, of course. The only other thing I want you to just talk a little bit about, because I know I have some PT geeks that might be listening. Talk about the athlete response model, because I saw that on your
Okay.
website and I'm just like kind of interested on it.
Yeah, so all it is just a framework to be able to process how we intake an athlete, how we monitor, or how we design the objectives we need to accomplish, and how we monitor whether we're getting the job done. So you have all these different models in physical therapy, in strength conditioning, about how you should program for an athlete, whatever it may be. I don't think there's one way to get the job done. There's a million different tools that we can use to get it accomplished. There are no right ways, but there are wrong ways. And so the goal there is to figure out what that athlete needs. And so we do a full evaluation on them. We do a lot of the hybrid performance stuff, merge it with the physical therapy stuff that I learned. And we do a full evaluation. We see where they're currently at. And then we use whether it's a needs analysis to analyze their sport, or their own subjective input about where they need to be. So we identify the gap between where they're at currently and then where they need to be in their optimal state. Then we figure out what interventions, what tools can we use to get that job done? How can we bridge the gap between where they're at now and then where they need to be? And then after a training cycle or two goes by, we reevaluate, we take a look, see how things are going. We see, hey, did you get faster? Are you jumping higher? And we use all objective numbers to figure out if we're actually meeting the goals that we've set. And then if it's working, great, we continue on, or maybe adjust the interventions as needed. it's not working, then we figure out we need a new way. This is one of the wrong ways. We need to figure out a right way to bridge the gap between where they're at. So it's nothing like earth shattering. It's just a simple framework to design how we're going to attack an athlete's current problems.
I think though, like, yeah, it's not groundbreaking, but to have to be aware and have the ability to focus on each athlete individually, I think is huge, because so many times, especially with team sports, you just get lost in the numbers. And, having that time where somebody actually focuses on you and your personal growth, I think it's unheard of in a lot of situations. So I think that's really cool. And hopefully that's one of the reasons that a lot of people do reach out to you guys.
Yeah, so I feel strongly the same way. So it's finding that balance between full individualization. Now, everything we do is fully individualized. But if we just did strictly one-on-one training, it would cost an absurd amount. And I'm not interested in pricing people out. I don't want to serve just rich people. I did not grow up with a ton of money. So I'm not interested in serving just people who have a ton of money. And so the model that we use, we call it small group personal training. So we have like up to 6 or 8 athletes in a group, but everybody's on their own individual program. It's all delivered through software, because I started out doing all online training. Everything was remote. I wasn't with them. And so everything is fully online via software. And so if they have to go to a travel, if a number of soccer players, and so if they have a club tournament that weekend, and they're going to be gone for a long time, we can adapt the program so they can do something in the hotel weight room or whatever it may be. So everybody's on their own program. It's just done in a small group, which allows us to keep the price point down. I use the barometer. Hey, if a high school kid can get a part-time job to pay for it entirely by themselves, then that's a good barometer that we're at a good place. And so now it's not cheap. It's an investment, but it's definitely an affordable thing. They could get a part-time job and do it, because we have like 6 to 8 athletes who currently are in high school and paying for it entirely by themselves. But yeah, because the individualization is important. If you, my hip is absolutely destroyed, Bailey. My right hip is annihilated because we were so bent on full depth squatting all the time, regardless of what was going on. 50 to 90%. So somewhere between 50 and 90, depending on the study you look at, 50 to 90% of high level athletes, especially field sport athletes. And so if you're looking at football players, soccer players, hockey players also fall into this realm because of the stress on their hip, have what we call cam deformity on their femur. And so it's this giant bump that develops on the front of their hip. And so whenever you go up into deep flexion, so if you go into a deep squat position, it literally contacts the front of the acetabulum, which is the hip bone here, and it contacts that and kind of pinches all the labrum, all the soft tissue structures in between. Now, not all athletes are built like that, but the majority of them are. And then we just keep nailing deep squats. So you have to hit depth, you have to hit depth. And so we're just exacerbating an issue. Some athletes should be squatting that level. Some athletes shouldn't have a bar on their back at all. Some athletes, and so we just want to make sure it makes sense for each individual athlete, the goal that they have and what they're trying to accomplish. So yeah, that's kind of a little tangent there. I don't know if that was really helpful, but
No, I think it's interesting. So what right now, what does, what's your team look like? Just so you can kind of a lot of listeners are from the Pittsburgh, Greensburg area, because obviously that's where I'm from. So kind of just talk about, GT and who works with you, and how someone would reach out to you guys if they're interested.
yeah, so if they're interested, I don't know if you can either share my number with them, or they can shoot us an email or whatever, or our information is listed on the website. So shooting us a text to that phone number on the website, or an email to the email on there works out just fine. But yeah, so we currently have 3 coaches outside of myself who are helping out right now. I am the only person who is full-time. I have Neil, who just finished up. He's an absolute baller, fantastic basketball or baseball player, even better human being though. So he just finished up his baseball career, so he's transitioning out of that. So he's been with me for a little while. And we have a couple other coaches who just recently started up, and are just really, really good people. So whenever it comes to hiring on coaches, that's what I look for more than anything else, is high quality human beings. We can teach you how to coach later on. But strategically, I don't want to scale very, very large. So that's why I'm hiring full time very, very slowly. I want to make sure it's the right fit because we obviously have a number of different realms that would make us not the right fit for somebody. I get very nerdy about the science stuff. So if you don't love continuing education, then you're probably not going to enjoy working there. And I want to make sure it's a good fit for somebody. And so we like to talk deeply about the science end of things, but also, as you can tell, we're a very mission oriented business. And so making sure that you actually care as much about the psychological components is very important. So hiring slowly to make sure it's the right person. So if there are any athletes who are looking to run faster, jump higher, get stronger, any of that stuff, they can shoot me a text or email or anything works really.
All right, awesome. Well, yeah, I'll definitely link the website because your website is very nice. It's very informative. So good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I absolutely hate it. I put it together myself and I do not like our website in any way, shape, or form. So thank you for kind words. It'll save me from having to completely overhaul it unnecessarily here.
Well, I think it's really good. And as someone who my website, I also don't like it at the moment. So that makes me feel good that other people feel the same way. But so thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot today. I hope that, people listening hopefully gained a little bit of insight and just, the performance side of things is both athletic, mental, and I think, your own experiences and just kind of getting to have that as you teach these athletes is really important. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Bailey.